Ghosts are real. And even the most ardent skeptic is haunted. You and I, we experience this haunting every day. We find ourselves deeply moved by music whose composers lived centuries before us. Our present-day emotions can become stirred by the works of artists and authors and actors who have long since passed. And we find ourselves still loving those we've lost and feeling loved by those we've lost with an intensity that transcends their passing. Physically, no, they're not here, but their presence is real. Their effects on us are very, very real. Ghosts are real, and we are haunted. Hello and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 1 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today, we travel to the Indiana and Illinois shorelines of Lake Michigan, where an enduring ghost once posed to a young man a question that would change the course of his life forever, a question that eternally echoes about the water. Episode 1. A Question Haunted. If something lurking in the swamp didn't devour him, the darkness surely would. Autumn twilight began to sweep across the vast and vacant landscapes of the Indiana Dunes State Park. Old wooden planks creaked beneath Will's feet as he crossed the murky water and neared the pitch-black mouth of a thick and deep woods. Will was alone, and he was terrified and fascinated. And fascination was clearly in charge. He followed the sandy trail for about 20 minutes deep into the woods. He knew Trail 9 well. Even in the busy season, it was a lesser-traveled trail, offering some privacy. And now, this late in the day, and during the off-season, there wasn't another person around for miles. Will took a left at the split in the trail and found himself staring at a wall of bold beige sand. He knew an incredible view of Lake Michigan must wait at the top, so up he went. Within minutes, Will was gasping for breath, the muscles in his legs straining to gain footing on the shifting sands. A silent war between comfort and fascination was being waged, and fascination was still clearly in charge. A gentle breeze welcomed Will to the summit. Taking in deep breaths of the cool, freshwater air, he stood tall, gazing on a scene of absolute perfection. Looking north, hundreds of miles of Lake Michigan's deep blue hues met the purple September sky. To the west, the low sun illuminated the wispy clouds, neon orange and cotton candy pink. In stark contrast, dark gray, ominous cumulus clouds were creeping slowly through the east. Beneath him, the soft sands descended 150 feet to a completely deserted beach. The entire landscape was accented by the bold greens of waving dune grass. And across the lake, the twinkling lights of the Chicago skyline began to flicker on. Will's heart glowed. What is it about this place? What is it about the sand that feels so alive? What is it about the Great Lakes that feels so different from anywhere else? What is it about the water? Will had always loved the Great Lakes, ever since he was a kid, but that moment was a nexus point for him, starting him off on a journey to see as much of the Great Lakes as time and resources would allow. Will's fond reflections of that moment were suddenly interrupted by the L-train announcement. Linden Avenue was next, end of the line, and all passengers must on board. The memory of that dune-top moment was still so vivid and immersive that Will found it hard to believe it was now a decade old. He had since moved from his lifelong home in northwest Indiana to nearby Chicago. 13 miles north of downtown, Linden Avenue was the farthest north Will could go via the L trains, and it was all unexplored lakefront for him. The train came to a stop, and Will exited through the station onto the centuries-old bricks that made up Linden Avenue. He walked the half-mile through the beautiful, upscale suburban streets and crossed the northern branch of the Chicago River, making his way to the lakefront via the huge and beautiful Gilson Park. After taking plenty of photos and exploring the park grounds for a bit, Will sat on a rock overlooking Lake Michigan. It was picture perfect. Light beige sand, bold blue waters, all set beneath a bright blue sky. A slight breeze sent him a reminder that the weather had not quite committed to spring yet. Will took in every detail. No matter what was going on in his life, the lakes never failed to soothe his soul, especially when he got the chance to check someplace new off his list. What is it about the lakes? How do they do their magic? What is it about the water? With a lakeward nod of appreciation, Will stood to set off back home. As he did, he found himself suddenly compelled to turn around, rapidly facing north like a compass needle. A feeling of curiosity became so intense in that moment that without realizing, Will began walking further north along the beach at a pace which left him short of breath. Glancing at his watch, he realized that he should be heading back home, but he found himself being pulled, driven, compelled to journey farther north. Trudging along the sand, he began to question his own motives and his own sanity. He noticed a pathway leading up to a small park between the lakefront homes that lined the beach. He walked up the sand to the park, and seeing a nearby bench, decided on a quick rest. Will sat, overlooking the lake. "I'm going crazy, aren't I?" he asked the park bench. He explained to the bench that he had traveled all over these lakes and could still barely understand them. "There is a magic here, an actual, real, true magic. I swear it, I can feel it," Will continued. "It's like the lakes are hidden in plain sight, full of treasure that nobody seems to notice. Yeah, they're beautiful to look at, but they're alive, you know? You can feel their mood, you can talk to them, you can breathe them in." Will realized the absurdity of his situation, sitting and conversing with a park bench. And yet, he had an odd, very odd feeling that the bench was agreeing with his every word. And he had a very, very odd feeling that he wasn't alone. Patting the bench, Will stood to go back home, thanking the bench for taking the time to hear him out. "You know, it's nice to finally meet someone who understands where I'm coming from," Will joked. As he turned to face the main road, Will noticed there was a small plaque on the bench. Not one to normally read them, he continued on his way. But suddenly, Will stopped. His inner compass was pointing right back to that bench. Overcome with a feeling that there was something he had missed, he approached the bench, deciding to read the plaque. It was a dedication, left a year prior in loving memory of a woman named Pamela. Beneath her name, in quotations, was one single sentence. "What is it about the water?" Seeing as how this is our first episode, I thought it would be apropos for me to share my own story with you as a sort of introduction. And as you may have guessed by now, my name is Will. I realize that as far as ghost stories go, this one is kind of subtle, but that's exactly why I wanted to lead with it. It's a reminder that the Great Lakes are not all that different from a paranormal experience. When you first see them, they do catch you off guard, sometimes with frightening power, and sometimes with a subtle and serene beauty. My experience with Pamela and her enduring words indeed rests in that latter category. I never saw an apparition. I never heard a voice. But of all the high strangeness that I've experienced in my own life, this is by far the most impactful. Words were passed along to me that day that shape the way I look at my life and my incredible Great Lakes home. They drive me, they intrigue me, and they haunt me. I feel compelled right now to pass this along to you, to keep those words alive. And my friends, if that's not a ghost story, I guess I don't know what is. With that, thank you sincerely for listening and for inviting me to be a part of your story. May it be as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.